again, and welcome to the Author Roundup. This special segment of the Book Connection Show showcases emerging indie authors who join us for a discussion of their newly published books. Join us for a conversation with our next guest author. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Author Roundup. We have an exciting conversation here today with the self-published author, Wil Brown. Wil Brown is a lifelong servant leader whose career spans military service, medicine, education, charity, and entrepreneurship. And beyond his professional achievements, he is a devoted father of three, a former scout leader, and longtime contributor to charity and hospital boards, bringing a life of service and leadership into every space he enters. His book is called Apocalypse Dawning. Hi, Wil. How are you today?
Doing great. How are you doing?
Very good. Thanks for being here. So you published a book last year, and can you tell us a little bit more about your book?
Sure. The book is actually a new take, I would say, on the apocalypse or revelations, and it goes back and forth to Daniel, Old Testament, New Testament. So it's something I became interested in many, many, many years ago, back when Hal Lindsey and all these other people were writing books about the second coming of Christ.
Mhm.
As I began to study on my own, I began to change my philosophies. And so this book is
Mhm.
roughly about how that all occurred.
And so what type of things can readers expect from your book? How is your book laid out? How did you go about writing your book?
The first thing I do is I begin by telling them my personal journey, my journey of going from the typical 7 year tribulation, pre-tribulation rapture to basically a totally different interpretation of what the word says. I
Hmm.
base that on studies of Genesis. So most people, when they ask me why I believe what I believe, I try to explain to them, if you want to try and understand the book of Revelation, you really have to know Genesis backwards and forwards.
Hmm.
So it starts off by telling how one day I'd been asked to teach Sunday school and teach Revelation for the third time. And I'd actually quit teaching Sunday school, but the leaders came and said, "Would you teach Revelation?" I'm like, yeah, okay. So I'd
Hmm.
been praying about this and trying to decide if there was anything new that I could teach other than what the little quarterlies, which the church provided, had. And one night, as I was reading about the beast and the vision that John had, he says, "Oh, a great wonder appeared in heaven, a woman
Hmm.
clothed with the sun, the moon, and the stars, and she gave birth to a child." One night, as I was reading about that, I said, "Wow, I've actually seen this. I
Hmm.
have seen that very thing." And so the first chapter tells you about how I scrambled up and down the steps to find a book, which was
Hmm.
actually this book, which I do reference um, in my book. This book is not a religious book at all. It's basically a glow in the dark night sky book, which I had so I could show my children how to navigate at night. I mean, that was why I had
Hmm.
it, Boy Scouts and all that.
Yeah.
And so that's why I had it. And yet, as I opened up to it in the early spring sky, there was the Virgin giving birth and the dragon waiting to devour her. And
Hmm.
that kind of changed my impression as to Revelation. Suddenly, it became very concrete that what John was saying was not something of a vision. He never said it was a vision, didn't say it
Hmm.
had a dream. He said a great wonder appeared in the heavens. And
Okay.
that started me looking to say, well, if this is actually something that concrete, what else is concrete?
Hmm.
And that's where the journey began.
Okay. And so you do approach, the book of Revelation not just as a theology, but lived experience. What first draw you to study John's Revelation so deeply?
Well, for one thing, except John is probably my favorite author, okay? And my second favorite author is William Shakespeare. So Middle English,
Mhm.
King James
Love
didn't
it.
frighten me because I liked Shakespeare.
Uh-huh.
Shakespeare was not dull. He was very animated. He made plays for people to laugh at, not for them to have to study the grammar about.
Hmm.
So as you get past the English teacher into Shakespeare, it becomes pretty interesting.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, that's the reason why there's movies made about, Romeo and
Yeah.
Juliet. The Lion King, which is Hamlet, which is one of my favorite. I mean, hey,
Hmm.
he was a great author. It gets buried. Well, the same thing's true in the Bible. So much of the Bible gets buried because of the language of the day not translating into today's language. So I try to translate that. I try to show people how, when it's talking about this particular item or that particular
Hmm.
item, this is what it meant in the day.
Hmm.
This is what it meant in the day. And it covers the eschatology or the second coming quite a bit, but it also kind of weaves off into other areas. The boring part about it is history. In order to teach part of this, I have to basically go through history that can be fairly boring. And you're like, okay,
Hmm.
this is what happened here. This is what happened here. And because this happened, that's why I believe this was fulfilled at that time.
Hmm.
And I warn the reader, I'm like, it's kind of like trying to teach algebra. If you don't learn how to do math, you're never going to learn algebra. So, as boring
Yeah.
as this is, we kind of have to do this. And I'm sorry.
And so how as a writer did you approach those maybe boring lessons in your book, teaching history? How did you go about writing about the history as an author?
Well, the first thing I do is I tell them, okay, it's going to be boring. Just
Make it
stay
more
with me.
fun,
Okay?
humor,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. If you stay with me, we'll get through this and then you'll begin
Nice.
to put the pieces together.
Hmm.
And so there's really a lot of things that, as you're looking at the book of Revelation, um, one of the examples that I'll put that's sort of boring when you begin to look at it, but as you begin to notice it, 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 it makes it become alive.
Hmm.
So John is an author who is very logical. He goes A, B, C, and he almost always goes back to Genesis. In the Gospel of John, it says, "In the beginning was the Word was with God." Well, in Revelation, he starts off and he goes to and he says, "I'm the Alpha and the Omega," talking about Christ. And you see this Alpha and Omega in a lot of churches and a lot of symbols. And if you look at the penny, they just stopped manufacturing the penny last year. And the
Hmm.
last ones they ran, they put a little omega sign on them to mean the end. And so that's how universal this alpha and omega is. But where did John get it? And if you look in the very first chapter of Genesis, in the very first sentence, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." And John, in his first two books of Revelation, describes Christ as saying, "I'm the Alpha and the Omega, and I'll walk among the seven candlesticks." When we look at these candlesticks and, frequently we'll think it's just candlesticks kind of strewn anywhere, kind of like little tapers. But for anybody that was Jewish of the day, seven candlesticks meant the
Hmm.
menorah.
Hmm.
And so he's saying, I'm there in the middle of the menorah. Then if you go back and you look at the first chapter of Genesis and you look at it in the original Hebrew, it's seven words. And the middle word is made up of two letters. And those two letters are Aleph in the Hebrew and Tav. And Aleph is like alpha, and
Mm.
Tav
Okay.
is the same as Omega. It's the last letter of the alphabet. So when he says I'm in the middle of the seven candlesticks, he literally is in the middle of the very first sentence in the Bible as Aleph Tav or Alpha Omega. And why is that important? The rabbis don't translate that word. They consider it to be the creative force of God.
Mm. Okay.
So for any Hebrew of the day reading, they would have known that's what was being said. But today that gets lost in us. And so that's the kind of thing that I try to throw in to say, we don't understand this because this isn't our culture. But if you
Yeah.
go back and look at the culture, suddenly you'll see that John is very specifically saying the same thing there that he did in his gospel. In the beginning was the Word was God, and the Word was the creative force of God. And so he
Hmm.
does that in Revelation. And that begins to clear up what he's talking about.
Okay.
It goes on into the seals. Now, I don't put this in the book, but I do believe the seals have already begun to be opened. You know what I'm talking about when I say the seven
Mm.
seals,
Yeah.
okay, of the scroll. And I ask people, let's say that you graduate from high school and your dad gives you your brand new dream car. Let's say that your dream car is a brand new $500,000 Ferrari, right? And he gives you that and he gives you the keys to that car, right?
Hmm.
You go get in it and drive it. When?
Oh, when?
Yeah, he gives you the keys. Here are the keys when you go drive it.
Oh, now? Then?
Now, exactly. So my theory is that as soon as Christ got the keys to those scrolls, he started breaking them.
Hmm.
He didn't wait 2,000 years to do it. And the history part is showing how he broke those scrolls and
Okay.
where these things have already occurred. So I have a totally different take on the
Hmm.
four horsemen. have a totally different take on the seven churches. So,
hmm And so you mentioned that this is kind of a not stumbled upon, but you really started to think about this and change your perspective on this. Is so all of this research and all your thoughts are in your book as far as how your mind was changed and when?
yes, and
Yeah.
one of the things I say repeatedly in the book is don't believe me. Don't believe me. Read the Bible like a book,
hmm
Genesis to Revelation. Don't piecemeal it, just read it like a book. But don't believe what I said. I
hmm
could be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think you mentioned this a little bit, but so how does your book really like or get more into it, like reframe the revelations as something like relevant to everyday life and not just future prophecy like people believe.
Well, exactly. The first the first way that I go back and do that is I do give anecdotes. Like for instance,
Okay.
I give a story of when I was in medical school, a woman that came in to give birth. Okay.
Mm, okay.
And she was a private patient. She came in to give birth. I was working her up. One of my high school classmates actually was working as a nurse at the
Mm,
labor and delivery facility. And so she had known me from high school. And I was fortunately a senior in medical school. Most of the people taking that rotation were juniors. It just happened. My rotation was the beginning of my second year. Theirs was the beginning of their first year of clinics. And
mm,
long story short, as I'm working this patient up, she comes and she calls me. She says, Leonard, I need you now. And I'm like, okay, what is it, Janet? And I go out with her. We walk across the hallway to where literally as I walk in the door, have you,
mm.
do you have children?
Yes, yeah, I have one. I'm pregnant with my second.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank
So,
you.
so, so you know what it means when your water breaks, right?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So, okay, I walked
Good.
in the door, and as soon as I walked in the door, she's laying on the table, and she's in the lithotomy position to deliver the baby. She's already in that position. And I
hmm
walk in, and literally as I walk in, water crashes out from between her legs against the wall, which is about 3 feet away. That's how forceful it was,
Oh
and
my, oh
crashes
my
to the
gosh.
ground. Yeah, so this baby's on its way. It's coming. It's there.
Yeah.
And so I delivered the baby. And when I finished delivering the baby, I asked about the patient that I had left
hmm
because I didn't really turn that patient over to anyone else.
hmm
Well, a student the year behind me was delivering the baby, and this was a private patient of the chief of OBGYN. So that doctor should have been in delivering the baby, but that never got translated.
Oh gosh.
Yes.
Oh no.
So, so
Scary.
yes. So I walked by the room where Pam was delivering the baby, and I looked in. I said, "Is everything okay, Pam?" She's like, "Yeah, sure, we're good." And so I went back over to the doctor's lounge for maybe 5 minutes of break time if you could get it. And when I did, the chief resident asked me. She said, "Where's the?" Oh, there's a patient coming in. Have you seen her? I said, "Oh yeah, Pam's delivering her right now."
Oh my gosh.
And so, as I put this in the book, after a few colorful metaphors, most of which had to do with bodily functions, she gets up and charges into the room, and Pam's already delivered the baby, the placenta, and everything. I mean, it was a perfect delivery,
Oh, that's good.
but not by the person that was supposed to be.
Supposed to. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. I'm glad it went well though.
yeah, it went well. And the reason that I point that out is because if you look in this Glow in the Dark Night Sky book, okay,
hmm
the picture of the Virgin right
hmm
here. Let's see if I can show that. So here's the Virgin in picture, but here's
hmm
what she looks like. And as you see, she's kind of laying like you lay when you're laying on the bed. See
Yeah,
that?
I see that.
So she is actually in that position. So
hmm
why would someone call the constellation Virgo when it's obvious that she's in a position to give birth? And what this constellation is beneath her legs or between her legs is a constellation called Boots, which is actually mentioned in the book of Job. That constellation is mentioned in the book of Job, and it means shepherd.
Okay.
So the shepherd is being birthed between her legs.
hmm
So if you begin to look at things and you say, well, that's concrete, and then you follow the rest of the chapter of uh, Revelation 11,
Mm-hmm.
12, 13, you can actually see every movement in that glow in the dark night sky book. It's just, is it spring or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
including the beast that rises out of the sea. So that beast is literally in the sky and nobody
Mm-hmm.
sees it
Mm-hmm.
because that's been forbidden for so many years. You know,
Mm-hmm.
astrology, astronomy, that gets kind of nervous when you start talking about this in churches. So
Yeah. Yeah. And so, so these like analogies or like real life experiences that you put into your book, was that something that you always wanted to do when you thought about writing your book, or did that just come up like organically when you were like writing, like putting in some analogies so people can, compare?
it came in organically because, for one thing, people like to read about you. They like to
Right.
read stories.
Relate to you.
They like
Yeah.
to know, how did you get where you're going, especially
Hmm.
when where you're going is so different than where you were.
Yeah.
So,
True.
yeah. So another analogy that or a story that I put in the book is a story about when I was in high school. So in high school, there was a group of us that were very, I guess, youth Christian oriented. Okay. We didn't have an organized group. It was called the sharing group. It wasn't called the navigators or anything. Now, the navigators were a group of, I don't know if you know what the navigators were, but they were a college group. And they certainly influenced this group because they may have been the college students that were there, but there was no adult leadership. It was just, high school students, maybe a few college students that would get together, different places, sing songs, pray, worship, pray for each other, and fellowship. That's all it was. But it became so close that we literally began to call people brothers and sisters
Hmm.
and invited everybody. I mean, it didn't matter, race, religion, nothing mattered. Didn't matter what you
Hmm.
did. You could have been the poorest kid or the wealthiest kid, and somebody felt like inviting you, you got invited. So it
Hmm.
was very egalitarian. But we became so close that everything was on the table. I mean, parents getting divorced, uh, friends committing suicide, which literally did happen. A lot of different things were on the table for discussion, and it was a very close-knit group. There was a great expectation during that time of the second coming that it would be like now, today, boom, it's coming. And everybody thought, oh, it's going to be today, it's going to be today, it's going to be today. So if we saw someone that was kind of down, maybe their parents had been mean that morning, or maybe they broke up with their boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, we had a word we would use because the school was fairly strict. You didn't have a lot of time between classes.
Hmm.
So if we're walking down the hall and say you were pregnant and you were having some postpartum depression or whatever, I'd look and go poof. And poof meant poof. You could be
Hmm.
gone.
Hmm.
Moment of twinkling of an eye, poof, you could be gone. And it was meant to cheer people up because it reminded them this is what is important.
Yeah.
All
Right.
these all these worries, all these problems, yeah, we deal with them,
Yeah.
but that's not forever. And
Yeah.
poof,
True.
poof is forever. And so I go through the whole chapter on that. And then at the end of the chapter, I go, but were we right? Were we right about the rapture being that way and coming that way? And were we right about the whole 7 year tribulation? And so I use that to move into the discussion about where is the rapture in the Bible? What does it really talk about? When it talks about the Great Tribulation, does it confine it to 7 years, or does it not confine it to 7 years?
Hmm.
And I go through things such as that. I also question the temple
Okay.
because there's a place where Christ in Matthew says, so I go back and I give a lot of the history of the time. In
Hmm.
other words, I'll go back to when Daniel was alive and I talk about Daniel. Uh,
Hmm.
I go back to the prostitute, or oh boy, this was really interesting because this word got taken out so many times because there's certain words you're not supposed to use in Christian literature, and one of them is whore. But how do you describe the whore of Babylon if you don't use the word that is described in the Bible?
Hmm.
So at any rate, I went in to describe things like the Whore of Babylon, which is in Revelation. And if you look at Revelation, this woman is described. She's very wealthy. She's riding on the beast. She has, she's dressed in purple and scarlet, and she's drinking the blood of the saints out of gold cups. She's so wealthy that she doesn't have gold to or to buy things. She literally has it as her drinking cups.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I spend time on that is because, especially within Christian genres and churches and things like that, everybody thinks of prostitutes as being, these evil people on the street that are, you know, selling themselves or selling other people, et cetera, et cetera. But they don't really understand what they're looking at in this woman. This
Mm-hmm.
woman is very, very successful. She's
Mm-hmm.
a very successful businesswoman. And so her job is not to, as I put it, her job isn't, the quick trick. Her job is to make the person that she's seducing and that's paying her lots of money believe she's the real thing.
Mm.
And if you believe she's the real thing, then you're going to embrace her and you're going to,
Yeah.
be influenced by her. Well,
Mm-hmm.
she's false religion, is what she is. But false religions today don't come across as witchcraft. They come across as being beautiful and
Mm-hmm.
luxurious and
Mm-hmm.
the real thing. I'm not the prostitute. I'm your wife. That's what she's trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go through describing that because that is not what we see. We're so in tune to our own ideologies and our own religious philosophies that to understand what John is trying to depict here and how beautiful this entity is, we see her as being this ugly, horrible prostitute, but that's not what he's trying to draw. He's trying to
Mm-hmm.
draw something that's attractive, that draws you in, that you want to believe in. You want it to be real. It's not, but you
Mm-hmm.
want it to be real and you desire it to be real.
Okay.
Yeah, so I spend time in that.
Okay. And so that kind of ties into my next question. So how does your book, Apocalypse Dawning, challenge how people view the church today?
Dramatically. Dramatically. As I was doing this, and this it's a humbling thing because I don't know the two things I don't know that anyone has done prior to this book is number one, connecting what John saw to the stars in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to tell people in the book, well, here's why this is an apostasy.
Mm-hmm.
Because God tells Abraham, look, your seed will be as the stars of the heaven. Well, we go back over into the New Testament, and there's a discussion about the seed being Jesus, not just the people. So if the seed is like the stars in the heaven, of course his story is written in the heavens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's already written there. The seed of Abraham and what he's done is in the heavens. And it says in Genesis, they're there for times and seasons and signs, not just, when is summer and winter.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing that I know no one else has done. But the second thing is, as I was reading through the seven churches of Asia, I was drawn back to the Lord's parables in Matthew. And the Lord gives us seven parables and says the kingdom of heaven is like.
Mm-hmm.
And there's seven of them, the same way there are seven churches of Asia. I don't know anyone else that has looked at each of those seven parables and realized that they correspond to one of those seven churches.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so that's something that will challenge modern Christianity because
Mm-hmm.
people don't want to look and say, well, wait a minute, you mean to tell me that this is a time period?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's been debate as to whether the seven churches of Asia were just seven individual churches, which of course they were, whether they were seven churches that are still present today in different churches that
Mm-hmm.
exhibit different problems, which they are, or are they seven epochs as well? In other words, seven stages of the church age. Um, People keep saying the kingdom of heaven. So we pray, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Well, what does that mean? Thy kingdom come. Is the kingdom of heaven something coming or is it something that's already here? Well, it's plainly something that's already here because the Lord teaches us the kingdom of heaven is in you.
Mm-hmm.
So these parables are all telling you about the kingdom of heaven, but each of them has a certain weakness in it.
Okay.
So, yeah, each of them has a certain weakness in it. The first parable is just the beginning when the seed gets sown. And as the seed gets sown, certain things happen. Some of the seed lands on shallow ground, so it doesn't sprout up. Or it sprouts up, but as the sun comes along, it withers and it dies. Some
Mm-hmm.
of it lands in good soil, and as it sprouts up, it grows and harvested and produces grain. But some of it, the birds eat. And that means it falls on the ground and it never takes root because the birds eat it. The second parable is the parable everybody knows about, and that's the wheat and the tares. So, very early in the church history, or the history of the kingdom, maybe is a better way to put it, tares were sown. People that look like Christians, they act like Christians, they say all the right things. Maybe they're even better acting than the Christians at being Christians because everybody knows what Christians are supposed to do except us. We don't know what we're supposed to do. So we're always bumbling around doing things we shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the way it is. But people that know how we're supposed to act, they never do things that they shouldn't, it seems. They're always just perfect, but those of us that are believers, no, we make mistakes every day. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but so the tares are there, and they're there by the second parable. Third parable is interesting. The third parable is the grain of mustard seed. And I really challenge the church on this one dramatically because the tradition of the church has been that the grain of mustard seed just shows how there's growth of the church, and it grows so large that the trees come and roost in the top of it. Or not the trees, the birds come and roost in the top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that important? I think that's important because I think that is a period of time in the church and in the growth of the kingdom of heaven when the church was indeed growing, but the hierarchy of the church or the top of the church is the birds. And the problem with this is if you go back to the first parable, the birds were eating the seed. So the word never got down to the people.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and that is not what they want to hear because that means that, and there was a time in history where this was the case. People were not supposed to read the Bible. The hierarchy was supposed to tell them what the Bible said. Uh, And I think it corresponds. And I even go historically and say, this is when that occurred. So that's one of those history lessons that's kind of boring, but it shows why that's the case. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then the next parable is the parable of the woman who takes 3 measures of bread or 3 measures of wheat, and she's making bread. And it says she hides the leaven in the bread, and that leaven goes throughout the entire bread. And everybody's like, oh, it's just the gospel spreading throughout the world. The only problem with that is there's nowhere else in the Bible where leaven represents anything but sin or false doctrine. And so, why would this one parable not represent sin or false doctrine? My belief is it does represent false doctrine. And my theory that I put forth, then again, I tell people, hey, I could be wrong. So don't trust me. Go back and read the Bible and decide for
Mm-hmm.
yourself. But my theory is that this false doctrine that was put in was basically the and it's part of the reason I think it says a woman did it. I think part of this false doctrine was basically when we introduced the concept of worship of things that were not God. And there are a lot of those things that were not God. So, any sort of false doctrine that became doctrine of the church.
Mm-hmm.
There are just so many things that are doctrine of the church that are just Jesus didn't talk about. I mean, lots of them. I mean, one of them is church building in and of itself. Nowhere does he ever say, hey, go and build a building. He says, build a kingdom, not a building.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the kingdom is the spirit. But we have just these incredible, and don't get me wrong, I love architecture and I've been to the Vatican, and I've been, all over the world really. And the incredible buildings that we built are incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that that was building the kingdom of heaven.
Hmm.
So, and so each of those parables, in my mind, corresponds to a particular thing that occurred within the body of Christ during the past 2,000 years. And I think we are at that last parable. And I look at the churches of Asia, I believe the same thing. So I show where in the churches of Asia, this is what it says happens. This is where that is in the parable, and this is what occurs. So,
Yeah, very interesting. And so how has writing your book um personally changed your faith or deepened your understanding of God?
wow. Uh, this book had been 40 years in the writing,
Oh, wow. Okay.
40 years in the writing, but only a year and a half of being put on paper.
Really? Oh my gosh.
Yes.
It only took a year and a half to write it?
Took a year and a half to base, well, not quite a year and a half, but about a year and a half to put it down.
Okay.
But the formulation of it had
Wow.
been over 40 years. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when I first saw that book was 40 years ago, literally
Mm-hmm.
40 years ago. And the past year and a half had been
Yeah.
very different for me, very depressing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the ability to sit down and write it was not only therapeutic, but it was a time of fasting.
Mm-hmm.
So during a portion of this, a church that I was attending wanted to, I wasn't a member, I just attended here and there. And I happened to attend one day when they said, oh, we want people to fast for the growth of the church. And I'm like, okay, fine. Why not? I'm not doing anything else. So I'll do that.
But
And as I started, and I needed to do it anyway because it was really a very hard time in my life. And so I started fasting. And as I started fasting for the church, I finished fasting for the church and had about a 10-day lapse and said, you know what? Now I need to fast for what I'm fighting, for the
mm,
battles that I'm fighting. And as I was doing this, I was writing the book. And then I began editing the book. The book was probably 100 pages more than it currently is. So
okay.
I sent it to the first editor, which was not the publisher, because I wanted a non-publisher editing first.
Okay.
And got a good editor. He was very good. And he would look and say, I think you ought to think about this, think about that, think about the other. And one day he sent me back and he had canceled out about 3 paragraphs in one chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, you need to think about this because you want your book to be readable within a certain period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it wasn't that many typewritten pages, it was about 400 or 500 printed pages. And yeah, but I didn't know that. I didn't realize it was going to be that many printed pages.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, but I went in and I looked at the chapter that he'd crossed out about 3 or 4 paragraphs on. I read the whole thing. I thought, I don't even need this chapter. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
yeah, the chapter was a nice anecdote. It was telling a good story, but it really didn't contribute to the flow of the book.
Okay.
And so I went in and eliminated about 3 or 4 chapters that one day and sent it back to him. He's like, wow. He said, you took me at my word.
Yeah, you did the assignment.
I said, well, do you think I should have, you know, left
Fail.
him in? And he said, no. He said, I really think you probably made the right choice. I just didn't want to.
He just started with the one and was hoping it would snowball.
Yeah, and it did. I went through, I'm like, I don't need that. I don't need that. That's not really giving a
Mm,
point. Uh, And then I came in and I did add a couple of chapters. And one of the chapters that I added, which gets lost, I think, in most stories about Revelation, I actually added the Easter week, crucifixion week. And I went day by day with what Christ actually did, because there's so much as to what he did that gets either misnamed, mislabeled, or misconstrued.
mhm.
And so people look and they will make these wild assertions and these wild comments. And I call it the magical mystery, mythical tour. Okay. So they're like, oh, this is what's going to happen. And we know it's going to happen because that's what we've been told for literally 150, 200 years.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And most of what's taught today regarding eschatology and the second coming is only about 150, 200 years old. It is
Hmm.
not what the early church fathers taught. But one of the examples that I'll use for you. And even Muhammad fell into this, okay? Even Muhammad fell into this. So there's a saying that Muhammad said, whether he said it or not, I don't know, it's attributed to him, that if the mountain won't come to Muhammad, Muhammad will go to the mountain, okay? Well,
Hmm.
he was referencing when Christ said, if you say unto this mountain, be lifted up and cast into the sea, it will be done. Well, how many times have you heard somebody say that? You have the faith to move mountains. Have you
Wow.
heard people say that?
Hmm.
Absolutely. But that's not what Jesus said. And it's interesting because Jesus comes the last week, Jesus goes into the temple, comes out of the temple. So he goes in on Palm Sunday, goes out. And when he goes in on Palm Sunday, everybody comes out to meet him and they literally usher him into the city. Now, that's kind of an important thing because everybody talks about the rapture, okay?
Hmm.
And they're like, oh, we're going to be raptured. We're going to be in heaven for 7 years, or some people say 3.5 years, whatever. And we're going to be there and then we're going to come back with Jesus. But the word that's used in scripture where it says that is a word called apatenson. It's a Greek word, and that's rapture is also in there. That word is in there, but the next word is apatenson. And apatenson is like going out to meet a dignitary.
Mm.
So the picture that's actually, yeah, so the picture that's actually being painted when that word is used is not us going out and going with him. It's us going out like East or like Palm Sunday and escorting him in.
Mm. Okay.
And
Interesting.
that change, yes, you see how that changes the
Yeah.
entire perspective. You're
Hmm.
not going up to something, you're going out and bringing the king in. You're
Hmm.
doing escort. And so that really questions the whole 7 year
Okay.
tribulation
Yeah.
thing, if that's truth. That's what follows up the whole poof chapter, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. So now you can see why poof was important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was I right when I said poof? Probably not. Or maybe I was, but not the way we thought we were.
Hmm.
Um, so what's happened is Jesus goes out and he goes into the temple and he comes down, and as he's going in, he looks at a fig tree. Now it's not quite the season for the figs, okay? But the fig tree's already bloomed. I mean, it's already full, as though it should have figs. And there are no figs on it. And so he curses the fig tree. And then he goes into the temple, and the whole day in the temple, he is preaching to his disciples, to the Pharisees, to anybody that will listen, that the temple worship is going to end. The temple will cease to exist. It's not going to be there. And so much so that he walks out, and as he's walking out, they go down into the valley of Kidron, which is probably where the fig tree was because there was a creek there. He
Hmm.
goes, they go down the valley of Kidron, and he's already told them, I'm going to tear this temple down and in 3 days raise it back up. They think he's talking about the real temple. So when they're coming down, they go, wow, look at these massive stones. I mean, this is impressive. This is a huge temple here. And how could this possibly be is what they're really saying. How are you going
Hmm.
to ever tear down this temple? And then he's walking down through there and they see the fig tree and they're like amazed that the fig tree's withered. It's gone. I mean, in one day, it's like poof, the worms have eaten it or something.
Hmm.
And so they're like, Lord, this is amazing. And he looks at him and he says, I tell you, you're going to do greater things than this. Because if you say unto this mountain, be lifted up and cast into the sea, it will be done. Well, what mountain was he talking about? It just came down it. He's talking about the Temple Mountain. He doesn't say if
Hmm.
you look at a mountain, he says if you look at this mountain, say be lifted up and cast into the sea. Well, what sea was he talking about? If you go back and you look in the Old Testament, in Proverbs and Psalms, you'll see all these different references to the sea.
Hmm.
And one of them's like, like the raging waters and the mighty sea would have cast over me had it not been for you, Lord. Well, what David's talking about there is the Gentile nations. So the sea in Judaism frequently referred to the sea of humanity. And if you get over into Revelation, when it says a beast rising out of the sea, it's pretty accepted that that sea is the sea of non-Judaism, the sea of humanity. So when Christ says, if you say unto this mountain, the Temple Mount, be ye cast into the sea, what he's telling them is the place of worship is no longer going to be the Temple Mount. Place of worship is going to be in the hearts of the people that are in the sea.
Hmm.
So, yeah,
Interesting.
now it begins to make sense.
Yeah.
And now you see you do have that power because as Christians, you have the power to have that place of worship cast into other people.
Hmm.
So I may not can move Mount Everest, but the Holy Spirit can move you.
Yeah. So have you gotten any feedback or reviews from your book? Anyone that has
What's interesting is that, yes, yes. And what's interesting is they love the anecdotes.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah, I'm like, well, that's not what it's written for. But they do. They like the personal experience, especially people that there's some pretty serious experiences in there. I mean, the first
Mhm.
chapter deals with the very year that this was opened to me, so far as the Glow in the Dark Night Sky book was not a good year.
Mm,
Business wise, it was a horrible year. I mean, I had to start a new practice and everything else.
mm,
And so when people see physicians, particularly and especially if you're a successful physician, they don't
mhm,
really realize the path that got you there. They don't
mhm.
know the number of uh, tuna casseroles you ate to get to, the Perry Steakhouse or whatever. And
Yeah,
they don't
true,
quite, they
true.
don't quite understand that.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of it. And the other thing is there are anecdotes. That deal with patient care, and there
Hmm.
are anecdotes that deal with just life in general. And
Hmm.
I think people all go through those.
Hmm.
You can't, when the Bible is no longer personal, then it isn't any different than reading any other book.
Hmm.
But when you begin to read that book and that book suddenly becomes alive,
Hmm.
and the words and the things that are in it suddenly have meaning, well, then you have to look at it a little differently. So I don't just give my experiences, I give the experiences of the people that are in it. So Daniel, um, I go to Daniel because I've got to give a list as to how false gods came into Christianity. So I go back to Daniel. So just tell me briefly what you know about Daniel.
Not much.
It's good. Most people don't. Most people know he was in the lion's den, and that's about it. But Daniel was a young Hebrew boy. And he was a prince. He was a prince of the Hebrews. And he was captured by Nebuchadnezzar and taken to Babylon. He was then put in charge, well, he was then put under the charge of a man who was the head of the eunuchs, which tells you probably, and this is a debatable point, but probably Daniel was a eunuch. So he was probably forcibly castrated when he was probably
Mm,
13, maybe 14.
mm,
And this isn't like some gender changing operation. This is a pretty brutal thing. They
mhm,
basically just, grab the sex organs, cut them off, and, you lived, you died, or whatever. And that was that.
mhm,
And then his name was changed. So his name was Daniel, but he was named to uh, Nebo, Nebuchadnezzar, I think, something like that, which means he who waits upon the king, or it's actually she, it's a female name. So essentially, he was turned into a female to perform services for the king. And you
mhm,
can read into that whatever you want. But the king very much wanted to make sure that these three boys that he had brought to them looked good and healthy. And that is what their supervisor was supposed to make sure of. So that gives you a different picture of what some of these people were going through in the Bible. And then I also deal with my son. So one of the inspirations in the book and the dedication to the book,
Mm.
uh, I don't know if you've read the dedication, but in the dedication to the book, I give a very brief story about one of my sons. And this particular son was learning Greek by the time he was in high school. He was thinking about going into the ministry and very bright, very challenged, and very intelligent young man. You can read the introduction of the book. It will tell you that he also fell totally away from Christianity, totally away from Christianity. And so the question is, how did that happen? So one of the purposes of the book, even though that wasn't the original purpose, one of the purposes of the book is to take people that either once had faith
Hmm.
or have always just looked at Christianity and the Bible as being something that was kind of, like any mythology,
Hmm.
and to show them with concrete evidence that this isn't mythology. Yes, what you've been taught is Christianity, may be mythology, but the book itself isn't mythology. And one of the comments I make is that either these people were time travelers, and had I not gotten into medical school, I was going to get my PhD in physics because that's my second love. And
Mm.
so quantum physics I just love. And so quantum physics basically tells us time travel is not possible, and for a lot of different reasons. Are there possible continuums that are on multiple levels? Yes. But is travel in the past of any of those continuums possible? Mm, Probably not, because it would destroy the continuum. So, yeah, it's not possible. So if time travel isn't possible, then for these prophecies in this book to be as spot on as they are, as deadly accurate as they are, somebody had to tell them. Somebody had to know this because they are dead on. And that's part of what the book is about is, yes, I know you've been taught this mythology, but it's like the mountain. Okay. So you have a lot of believers that are out there saying, if I pray hard enough, I can move that mountain into the sea. And they really believe it. But because that's not what the Lord was saying, they're not going to necessarily have success. Now, will they have success? Maybe. Maybe they will be able to move that particular item that they want into the sea. But
Hmm.
just because you have the faith of a grain of mustard seed doesn't mean that your boyfriend's going to come back to you, because he has free will and he can choose to do what he wants to.
Hmm.
Um, but so that part of Christianity, I really feel has been detrimental rather than showing the truth of the reality of it. We have painted a picture of um, things that don't exist. And it's kind of interesting. Mega churches have been real bad about this. And I don't know if you've seen the recent statistics, but mega churches are falling right and left right now. So,
Mm, really?
yeah. Yeah. A lot of them are closing their doors. Even places like Willow Creek, which was one of the big starters of mega churches, is beginning to fall
Mm.
on times. So it's kind of interesting.
Mm. And so do you have a favorite part of your book that you wrote? Obviously, this is 40 years in the making, and just, having it concrete and physical, um, to be able to, hold it in your hands. Is there a part of your book or most important part of your book that you believe, in your opinion, is the best or
Ooh, the best. I
Mhm.
don't know about the best. Um, I did an epilogue. An epilogue dealt with my son. So the prologue or the intro begins with my son, and the
Hmm.
epilogue dealt with my son because he and I are still separated ideologically dramatically. Okay.
Hmm.
And so I do have in there a little thing where I basically say the problem that people miss and the problem that my son and I are missing when it comes to dealing with each other is there is no uh, real bridge between people. There's a bridge between people and God. Because if we think there's a bridge, we think that, oh well, Bob did me wrong. And since Bob did me wrong, he needs to build a bridge back to me, or I need to build a bridge to him. Well, the truth is, none of us are perfect. We've all done wrong to everybody in some shape, form, or fashion. And when you really begin to see yourself as Christ sees you, it's not really very pretty. I mean, I have a lot of accolades. I was chairman of our National Academy's Board of Governors. Um, I sat on the board of hospitals and on the board of charitable institutions. I was one of the first people to do some of the surgical procedures that are in my specialty. Uh,
Mm,
yeah, I mean, I had a very pleasant career if I see myself through the eyes of my colleagues, but not if I see myself through the eyes of Christ. Everything sort of falls apart.
mhm,
And so, regardless of what my son and mine's disagreements are, we're both on the same side of the bay,
mhm,
and Christ is on the other side. So the only bridge is Christ. And if we take that bridge, then we're both in the same body, and then we're both of one mind. It doesn't matter what we did to each other. We forgive and we forget and we move on.
mhm,
So that is one of my favorites because the book is about forgiveness and reconciliation. And the story of the second coming and of prophecy is really just to get you to that point of reconciliation. And
mhm,
as an example, uh, towards the end of the book, I go back to the Garden of Eden. And when I go to the Garden of Eden, I tell the story of Adam and Eve, but
mhm.
I tell it a little differently. I tell
Okay.
it the way it is, but I interpret it a little differently. So people miss a lot of the things about Adam and Eve. So let's say that there is an Adam and there is an Eve. Well, does that mean that's all there is? No, not necessarily, because they're actually two different things of creation in Genesis. The first one is God created uh, everything in the earth on the sixth day, he created man, male and female created he did. Then it says later that he planted a garden east in Eden and he created Adam and put
Mhm,
Adam in the garden. Well, Adam doesn't necessarily have to be the first man. He may be, but he doesn't have to be. What God did in the first chapter may not be the same as what he did in the second chapter. It doesn't matter because we're all descended from him anyway. So it really doesn't matter. But then he created Eve. But before he creates Eve, he creates all the animals in the garden. Now, in the first account, God created the animals first and then Adam. But now then, or then man, but now then he's created Adam, he's put him in the garden, and he creates all the animals and brings them before Eve looking for a helpmate, and he can't find them. And so he causes a deep sleep to come on Adam, and he took a rib. Now, the English version says a rib. If you actually look at the Hebrew, it's more like he took the whole slab.
mm,
Now, from a medical perspective, the reason that's interesting is the rib is the only bone in the body that I can take out of you and it will regrow. And how did they know that 4,000 years ago when they wrote that
mm,
story? So Adam's ribs could regrow so long as what we call the sheath, the bony sheath was there, they'll regrow. But that's what he did. Um, and now then, Eve eats of the forbidden fruit. But what a lot of people miss is Eve wasn't alone. Adam was with her when she did it, and he allowed her to do it. Now, God never told Eve, don't eat the forbidden fruit. He told Adam. Adam's who told Eve, but Adam didn't enforce it. So Eve ate of the forbidden fruit. And it says, and she gave it to her husband who was there with her. So now then she's given it to Adam. Now then they've both fallen and they can't communicate with God as well. And so then God is walking in the garden in the evening and he yells out, Aika, where are you? Okay, where are you? Do you think God knew where they were physically?
mm,
God's all knowing. He knew where they were. He knew where their bodies were. But what had happened, and I hope this has never happened to you. Okay. At the time I was writing this chapter, it had sort of happened to me. What had happened is maybe when you were a teenage girl, you had a crush on some guy and maybe you dated him for a while and then he broke up with you. And when he broke up with you, you were brokenhearted because when you two were together, okay, you felt as one.
Mm-hmm.
But now that relationship is broken. You saw him in the hallway, but you didn't know where he was here.
Mm-hmm. Mm, yeah.
So God saw them, but he didn't feel them.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you? Where are you? And that's the question we have to ask ourselves today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. God is asking everybody, where are you? Are you here with me? Are you one with me? Or are you going to be with me? Where are you? So that's the way I interpret what happened in the garden.
And that's in your book?
That's in the book.
Very cool. Very good.
You like that,
Yeah, I did.
huh? Yeah. I
So
told you I look at things differently.
you do. Yeah, I like it. I like it though. Thank you so much for being on the show, Will. I love your, interpretations and perspectives and I'm so happy that your book came to life after 40 years of,
Yeah.
how does it feel to be an author? Had you written like a book before or I mean papers and stuff, I'm sure from your
Oh, yeah,
career.
lots of papers. As a matter of fact, I at one time had the largest dog bite study in the world. Uh,
Oh my gosh.
they still treat dog bites the way that I described 30 years ago.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I had actually written a novel, which I have never published because I've never finished it prior to this.
Oh.
And over the past year, as I was writing this,
Hmm.
concomitantly, I was writing what I would call a therapeutic novel, which is actually fairly good from what the people that are proofing it tell me. The only
Oh,
problem is once this started getting published, the other book requires about 2 chapters, totally science fiction type futuristic novel. I don't know if you remember George Orwell's 1984.
yeah.
All right, it's a reworking of that, bringing it up to date.
Oh, okay.
It's
Okay.
called So the working title is 2084, and
Okay.
it's got two
Nice.
chapters to finish it off, and that's it. Uh,
Ooh, okay.
yeah.
That's exciting. Is that what
Yeah.
you're going to work on this year? Or
Well, it depends. This
like
is
it
all
could.
this is all based on life choices, and fortunately, my life is moving a lot smoother than it did last year when I was in depression. So uh, I
That's
guess I write better in depression.
oh gosh. All
So
right.
it was a pleasure meeting and talking to you.
Yeah, it was great talking to you too. Is there anything else that you'd want to mention to our audience today before we go?
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically the book should be out in audio. The
Ooh.
publishers haven't actually gotten back to me. They were supposed to get back to me with names, but it should be out in audio, which I think most people listen to audio more than they do books.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
exciting.
and yeah, and hopefully that will be good for them. But until then, it's out. I mean, you can download it for like $4. So if you haven't read it, get it and read it. And if you have any questions, you actually have my address, so you can get me.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Do you want to give that to our audience? Your email
Sure.
address or
I'm glad you did say that.
yeah.
I'll give you two things. One will be the email address, but the other one is I am on TikTok. It's candle.in.darkness. Candle in the darkness. And so that's TikTok. And email address would be VOLWILDHOGS, like Vol Wild Hogs,
Mhm.
because this is Tennessee, so we're Vols, uh, at yahoo.com.
Okay. Okay. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Bill. We wish you the best of luck with your book. And if you listening want to read Will's book, you can head to westbowpress.com to find it through our online bookstore. And like Will said, you can find it, other places. You can get on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Will, for joining me.